Hello and welcome to my show Indus Cuisine, and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. We're back with a new episode from the heart of Pakistan. Today's recipe is very easy, and you can say you might have heard about this recipe, or maybe the sister recipe of this. So as people know that there's this recipe called Halim, which we've taught in our show also, and today's recipe is known as mutton khichra. Since back in the day when this recipe was always made with mutton. Why? Because during the time when the Mughals ruled, mutton was considered the meat for the elite and beef was considered the meat for the common man. Because of that, now there are a lot of recipes that have come to the human eye which are using beef more than mutton. But traditionally, there are some houses still in Pakistan where still people do not use chicken or beef at all. So the mutton we're using today is mutton with bone. This recipe will be made with bone. Why? Because this recipe needs the juice or the fat that comes from the bone and the fat with the mutton, which is actually whole. If you take the boneless piece, what will happen is you won't get that strong aromatic flavor this recipe requires. And the other thing is there are two ways of doing this recipe. The first way is that you use the bones in this recipe, or the second way of this recipe is that you debone the whole thing. But for this recipe, we won't be deboning this. Why? Because I would like to keep the bone in the food so that when people want to enjoy it, they can use the bone also. Why? Because the bone always adds more flavor to the recipe. So now what are the ingredients? A quick rundown. This recipe does not have onions, as if you see in terms of raw. We have onions which are completely fried. Now the reason is that if you start frying onions, it will require a lot of time and it will require a lot of energy. So nowadays in Pakistan or in the West also, what happens is that people are usually using fried onions, which you can find easily in the market. Then you need around 300 grams of black lentil, which is also available in the market in terms of the green version also, you could say. I took a little bit of time. Why? Because I needed to explain you the word which is actually used in our local language, but that would be a bit difficult. Why? Because there is no translation for that. So then the second thing is you need some broken lentil. We call this basically dal. Dal means the chickpea, which is the smaller version, and we split it. So it's also called the split lentil. Then you need some barley. You need some green chilies, which I'll be using towards the end. You need some garam masala. You need some red chili powder. You need some turmeric powder. You need some cumin powder, coriander powder, some black cardamom, which is over here in the same bowl in which I've put some cinnamon. So you need some cinnamon also, some salt to taste, around a cup of oil, and as I've told you, 2 to 3 bay leaves. You need some lemon, mint leaves, and some coriander fresh. These are all the things you would require. Okay, so now what you need to do is, first of all, you need to start cooking the lentils and the meat separately. So when you cook it separately, what will happen is it will properly get soft. If you add it together in the same pressure cooker, it will take much more time, and when it takes more time, what happens is the texture of the recipe also changes and the cooking time increases and your time in the kitchen will also increase. So firstly, what you need is you need a pressure cooker, which I'll place on the stove. I'll keep it over here and I'll just increase the heat. You need some water in it, around, you could say, 1 liter. 1 liter of water will go inside. So I'll just add a liter. I'll leave around half a liter over here on the side for the mutton. So the mutton will be cooked later on. So firstly, what you need is you need to wash the lentils. For that, you need to pick up a fresh bowl, which I'll keep over here. Then you need some black lentil. You need some split chickpeas, you could say also, and you need some barley. This goes in. What I'll do is I'll add some water in it and I shall rinse it. Now you need to understand one thing, this needs to be rinsed at least 3 to 4 times. So I'll just move it and I'll rinse it and then I'll show you the next look. So as you can see, I've rinsed the lentil at least 5 times. I didn't show it on the camera. Why? Because it's just washing. You can do that. I just did it once in front of you, drained the water properly, and then I added more water and I did it again. So now you just have to transfer the lentils and the barley in the water, keep it on the side, and now give it a lid. Once the whistle starts blowing, which it shall within, you could say, around 2 to 3 minutes, what you'll do is you will then give it around 10 to 12 minutes. You'll open the pressure cooker. If you see that the lentil is not soft, then what you'll do is you'll give it another 10 minutes. So now we'll leave this for at least 10 to 12 minutes, and on the other hand, we'll start making something else. So you need a wok now, and in the wok, you need to add some water. You need to boil the mutton first, remember that. So what I'll do is I'll take the cling wrap off, and I'll just switch the board. Why am I switching the board? It's because I would like to put some cuts on the meat. So this goes over here, and this goes at the back. So now you'll add the mutton on the board. It goes here. As you can see, the mutton is completely clean. It's properly washed, remember that. I'll take my paring knife and I'll just make some slight cuts on the part where the mutton is a bit thick. So there are bones in this, the ones which has bone attached to it, the meat basically, you let it be like that, and wherever you see this hard part, you'll just make like slight cuts. Why? Because that will help the mutton to cook much quickly. Okay, so this is what you need to do. This recipe does not have any ginger or garlic. We are just using fried onion, and that's about it. Okay, this is done. Now what I'll do is I'll pick this up and I'll toss it in the pan, and I'll add water from top. Okay, so the water goes in, shake it up, and that's about it. Now I'll just mix it up and I'll add some salt, not too much, let's say just around half a teaspoon. Why? Because I'm boiling the mutton. Then you'll add around 3 to 4 small pieces of the cinnamon stick, and I'll just mix it up once. So now what you need to do is you need to let this boil. It will take around, you could say, 10 to 15 minutes. So till the time this is cooking, what we'll do is we'll start preparing the other things for this recipe. First of all, for this you would require a fresh frying pan. I'll keep it over here, and I'll increase the heat. So when the heat is completely full, what you need to do now is you need to bring the pan to heat. Okay, once the pan has come to heat, then other things which we shall follow. I'll keep the paring knife over here. I'll be not using it. I'll just pick up the board and I'll shift a green board over here. This goes here. Now what you need to do is you need to pick up some green chilies, and you shall finely chop them. Okay, we need some green chilies for later on also, so I won't be using all of them in a go. So what you need is, as you can see, the pan is hot. What we'll do first of all is we'll add a little bit of oil, not all of it. So let's just say add around 4 tablespoons of oil and reduce the heat to medium. The heat goes down. As you can see, the water has come to boil. That's why this part of the pressure cooker has come out. When the whistle starts blowing, what I'll eventually do is I'll reduce the heat. Okay, so now finely chop it. And as you can see, it's a very nice, pleasant weather in Islamabad today. It's drizzling. I thought if it rains really fast, then only I shall stop the shoot. But if it drizzles lightly, I'll continue with the shoot. Why? Because it's a nice weather and you can enjoy it while you're cooking it. Okay, so you might be thinking that if they're recording in the rain, what would happen with the cameras or the lights we're using? We usually cover them up with plastic sheets. We weatherproof them and then we continue. I like sharing all of these things with you. Why? Because if I tell you how to do it, what to do about a show when it's recorded, then only you'll actually feel more part of the show. That's how I believe that it's just not about the cooking, it's about the experience altogether. Okay, I've added this over here. Okay, now just turn it, add just a pinch of salt. Why? Because I want the green chilies to cook and just, sweat a bit. Over here, the pressure cooker has come to heat. The color of the water is also changing. Why? Because the mutton is cooking very nicely and slowly. Okay, this is done now. Now what you need to do is you need to let this cook for at least 30 seconds, and with that you need to add around 2 pieces of bay leaf. Okay, this is done. I'll just turn it and I'll just push it a bit over here so that the oil gets this nice heat and this flavor from the bay leaf and everything. On the other hand, what I'll do is I'll just add a single piece of black cardamom. So now as you can see, the green chilies are cooking properly. What I'll do is I'll just spread it out so that it gets proper heat, and now let it cook lightly. Okay, when you see that the mutton is boiling, what you'll basically do is if you keep the lid on, the steam and the foam of the meat will start pouring out. So whenever this happens, you need to just tilt the lid and keep it on the side, especially when you're cooking outdoors. Why? Because if the heat is going to continuously hit the pan, the water temperature will go down, and when it goes down, the cooking time will increase and your food's texture and the consistency will get a bit shaken up. So just move it a bit. And then the second step, people don't usually tell you this, but what we'll do is we'll pick up a small bowl, and you can see this foam on top. This foam is basically the impurity that comes out from the bones of the mutton, which we shall not be using. I can bet on it that when this recipe is cooked in the streets of Pakistan, this is not done. Why? Because people do not realize that this is all the impurity. I'm keeping it over here. You can have a look that this is what you need to always pull out. Okay, so now we'll let this cook, and once we come back from the break, I'll let you know what to do next. Keep watching Indus Cuisine. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching Indus Cuisine and I'm your chef Basim Akhund. During the break, I just did one thing. The lentil was already ready, so I just took it out and I've kept around a cup of water. The water isn't from the jug on the side. It's the same water the lentil was cooking in. Why? Because it has flavor. On the other hand, what I'll do now is I just partially cooked everything in the wok over here, and now I shall transfer everything from the wok to the pressure cooker. Why? Because I would like to cook the mutton for another 5 to 6 minutes on high heat in the pressure cooker so that the meat starts falling apart. You have to remember one thing, these things need to be followed a bit. Why? Because then it takes you a long way. Okay, now what you need to do is press it down and then lock the pressure cooker. Okay, this is done. Put the whistle back on, and once the whistle starts blowing, you shall cook it for another 5 to 6 minutes. So now I need to tell you something about this recipe. This recipe is a sister recipe of the halim. So traditionally when the halim was made, it was made in pots which were actually under the ground. It was made on wood fire, and people used to bash it with big wooden spoons or spatulas which were almost around 10 feet long. There were two people on each side with these wooden spatulas, and they used to like bash it down, and what used to happen is the lentil, which is not broken over here, which I'll show you right now, it used to get mashed properly and used to break down. So now what you need to do is you need to improvise. And when I say improvise, it means that you need to understand that we live in a modern world and we cannot cook in that way anymore. So what we'll do now is we'll pick this up, transfer it to a food processor, and we'll blend it into a paste. Why? Because khichra, it means that it is something which is mashed to a point that the texture of the recipe changes and it converts into a paste. Back in the day, they didn't have machines, so the only way was they used to bash it down for hours and hours. Yes, when I say hours, I do really mean that. If you see some recipes which are really from the olden days, you might find something online that would prove me right. Okay, so now what you'll do is you shall just pick it up, transfer it here, and process it into a fine paste. This goes in. So as you can see, there's only a cup of water, and then I'm adding all the lentil in this. This goes in. You'll process it until it turns into a very fine paste. Why? Because that paste will give this recipe a texture. I've switched the stove off, or I've put it on pilot over here so that I do not burn the chilies over here. So now, first what you'll do is you shall process this. So as you can see, I've converted this into a paste, and after that what I've done is I've then added another cup of oil over here. So when the cup of oil will come to heat, we shall further fry the fried onions so that we can get that nice fine flavor in this. On the other hand, you need to realize that if you will not convert this into a fine paste, you will not get the perfect texture, and for that, if you have a machine which is very heavy duty, then only that can happen. Otherwise, the other thing what you could do is you can let the lentils soak in water for 2 hours and then do it. On the other hand, when we shall add the khichra over here, or the khichdi, which means basically mashed, you shall let it fry. Do not mix it in the oil immediately, and keep this on the side. What I'm doing in front of you is I'm just making some sections and just moving it so that it doesn't stick in the pan. Okay, we're frying this. We're going to move it a bit so that the oil comes in between. As you can see, the texture of the recipe is also changing. And now I'll give it, let's say, around 2 minutes on medium heat. So the heat is full right now, reduce it to medium and start just mixing it up. Okay, so till the time this is cooking, what we'll do is now we shall remove the pressure cooker from heat and I shall dish out the meat from this. The water in the pressure cooker will not be wasted. We'll keep it on the side and I'll let you know why. So as you can see, I gave the mutton around, you could say, 15 minutes in the pressure cooker, and before that I cooked it for like around 10 to 12 minutes. It's nice and it's soft and it's breaking apart in front of you. And now what you need to do is now you need to continue with the recipe. There's a lot to be done right now, but you had to learn all these steps. On the other hand, you can see the texture over here. It is frying nicely and slowly. Now what I'll do is I'll start just folding it a bit. So we shall fold it and we shall start mixing it from the edges towards the inner part. Okay. Why? Because the edges are a little crispy now and we want the texture to be maintained evenly. As you can see, this has cooked nicely and evenly, and now I need to change the pan. Okay, I'll keep this over here. We'll pick up a fresh pan. It goes here, and now you need to remember, you need to continue with this recipe. So now we need around just 2 to 3 tablespoons of oil. Why? Because we need to fry the herbs. Okay, so I've put it on the side. I'll give it a lid and I'll bring some oil from the back and I'll then tell you what to do next. So now you need to add another quarter cup of oil. The quarter cup of oil goes in. When the oil will come to heat, what we'll do is we'll add another thing. The other thing is we need to add the fried onions. You will further fry the onions. Why? Because you want that onion's flavor to be in the oil. So now, before that, what you need is you need some bay leaf, which will go in, and then you need the dry herbs, which will go in. First, we'll add the remaining 2 black cardamoms, and then we'll add some cinnamon. The cinnamon is a bit broken, so we'll just tilt it out and we shall fry it. The heat needs to be completely high. Why? Because the heat distribution needs to be proper. When the heat distribution will be proper, then only you'll get an even texture of your food and the consistency of the flavor will be maintained. Okay, it has come to heat now. What we'll do is we shall add the onions. I would like to fry the onions further so that the flavor of the recipe is enhanced even more. So what I'll do is I shall start mixing it. Bash it down a bit. And then mix it even more. The fragrance of this is remarkable, and trust me, you would love it. Okay. Slowly and gradually, it will take you a long way. And now, as you can see, I've pushed the onions on the side. The reason behind that is I need to add some spices. So the garam masala goes in the end, not right now. So first we'll add the cumin powder, goes in over here. Reduce the heat to the pilot. Why? Because I don't want to burn the onions. Then we shall add the turmeric powder. Then you shall add the red chili powder. Then towards the end you shall add the coriander powder. So all of this goes in. I'll keep all the things which I've used on the side because I would not like to create clutter. Now start mixing it. And now the cup of the broth you left on the side, which I'll add over here, and then I'll increase the heat to full. Now keep mixing it and give this a lid and cook it for 1 minute on medium heat. So medium heat needs to be there. It needs to be cooked for at least you could say a minute, and then I'll tell you what to do next. Till the time this is cooking, what we need to do is we need to use a few herbs. So the fresh herb which we'll be adding to this recipe, people add it on top, but I like adding it in the beginning, is the coriander. The coriander needs to be freshly washed and deeply washed also. And right now I will just use the sticks. Why? Because I want the intense flavor. So just finely chop it and take this and keep it on the side. Just pass your knife multiple times through the sticks. Why? Because this is the part that needs to be really, really fine. This is done. Take the lid off, mix it up, and transfer it over here. This goes in, mix it up, and now add the mutton now. The mutton goes in. keep this on the side, or maybe in the sink now, because you don't need it, and start mixing it up. I'm doing it right now so that the mutton gets this nice coating of the masala which I put at the bottom. So just mix it. Keep it on the side, and now just flip it. This is done now. So now the next step is you need to add all of this into this. So as you can see, there's oil, it's pretty heavy. Use both of your hands and just transfer it on the top. This is done. Keep the lid on and let it be on the side now. So the recipe is almost done, but now you need to mix it thoroughly. Because it's a little heavy, you need to keep flipping it and mixing it. Now as you can see, the density of the mash, also known as khichra, khichra means to mash something, is heavy, which will require multiple flips of the meat so that all the flavor is properly mixed. I didn't break the mutton down because for this recipe I've kept the mutton with the bone so that people who like enjoying the meat with the bone can also enjoy it properly. So keep mixing it till the time there is consistency of color in the wok. Remember that right now there is no consistency, and trust me, it's even tiring me down, and you need to start mashing it. So what I'll do is I'll keep the handle over here and I'll give it a rest, and I'll start mashing it like this. So I'm basically mashing it. Why? Because it requires mixing, and for this you need to mash and mix at the same time. And now this is done. Now what I'll do is I'll add the garam masala. As I said, it will go towards the end, but spread out nicely on top. And now we shall start the manual labor again. I'm laughing, why? Because I love these challenging things. Some things have never been taught in Pakistan, and if they have been, they've been taught in a very you could say untimely manner, and that is something I do not prefer when it comes to cuisine. You need to be very thorough with telling people what to do. Okay, this is done. You just need to concentrate on the texture, flip it up, and now start pushing it down again. So this is done, and now I shall dish this recipe out, and I shall garnish it with a few things which I'll let you know just in a bit. So as you can see, today's recipe is ready. This recipe is basically filled with a lot of energy, with a lot of protein, with a lot of, you could say, things that give you that energy people require for a good long day. Why? Because it has two forms of lentils. It has some barley, broken barley, then it has meat, broth, and it has all the nice things in the world that a dish could offer. It has a little bit of oil, so if you want to cook it with less oil, you could do that also, but specifically with this recipe you would require it. There's a reason why. Because when I added it to the wok, you could see that I was mashing it. The moment the stove goes off or there is less oil, what will happen is when you try bashing it down, you will feel this thick consistency which will not break down. Oil helps you break it down. It helps it in a circular motion in the pan, and it gives it a nice texture. This recipe is ready. It was very easy. You could try it at home, and this is something, if I would cook at home, I would call a few friends. Someone would boil the lentil for me, someone would boil the meat for me, and I would do something else. So it's something you could do as a group also. I hope you liked today's episode. I'll see you in another episode of Indus Cuisine. Take care of yourselves, lovely people. Bye-bye.